Now, the last time I got up here to preach, it didn't go as well as I planned. Some of you are laughing, you remember. For those that weren't here, in a nutshell, my wife got up out of the sermon and walked out, and then Pastor Dave did. That's not good when your wife and the pastor both walk out. But anyway, I want to talk about hospitality. Why hospitality? A big part of this came from when we had a chance to serve over in Kenya about 3 years ago. There was a gentleman, Abram, and a man named John. Abram is a person that acts as a translator at the Oasis Hospital in the UAE, United Arab Emirates. He's originally from another country, never had much of an education, but he speaks about 10 or 12 different languages. He walks around with a white robe, carries a large stick, but that's because he had polio and his one leg is withered up. Abram, though, was a man that showed great hospitality to my family. John is a person that's a driver for many of the missionaries at the mission station in Kajabi, Kenya. He's one that had been the postmaster in this town, and we had him over, he and his wife, over for a Christmas meal. His wife showed up in this beautiful Kenyan robe, and I said, "That is really marvelous." She said, "Yes, this is something what we would normally wear to a wedding here in Kenya." I said, "Thank you very much for wearing such a robe to our house. We feel very honored." She said, "You're the second white family in 20 years to have us to their house, to have them into their house for a meal." Here's a person that was the postmaster, drove many of these missionaries around. It turns out his brother-in-law is the head of the local Bible school there, committed Christian, active in the church, but in 20 years, 2 white people had him into their house. Doesn't say too much for Christians for hospitality, does it? We oftentimes fall down on the job. Hospitality. Bill Crowder, who was with the radio Bible class, he went and wrote that in 1987, his family moved to California to take up a pastorate of a church in the Long Beach area. The day we flew into town, my secretary picked us up at the airport to take us to our house. As we pulled into traffic, the very first thing I saw was a bumper sticker that read, "Welcome to California. Now go home." Do we have that same attitude in our churches often? It's nice to meet you. Now go home. Not exactly a warm and cheery welcome to Southern California. He goes on and says, "I wonder if there might be occasions in our lives where we send similar signals to people around us, whether we're at church, in the neighborhood, or at social gatherings. Are there times when we fail to make others feel welcome in our world?" Hospitality. We probably think we know the meaning of it. Here's from the online dictionary. It says, number 1, the friendly reception and treatment of guests or strangers. And I want to emphasize the part strangers. And then the quality of or disposition of receiving and treating guests and strangers in a warm, friendly, generous way. That's the dictionary definition. If you were to Google hospitality, what comes up first is a number of schools to train you in hospitality. But it's to train you in how to run a hotel, not in how to have people to your house or how to have people feel welcome in your church. If you go and you look at what does the Bible have to say about hospitality, it talks about the pursuit of strangers, pursuing them. It's an active word, an active tense, going after them, not doing this in a haphazard manner. Tim Keller from Redeemer Church in Manhattan, in New York City, talks about hospitality is a Christian practice, a principle that is laid out throughout Scripture. And we can follow hospitality from Genesis to 3 John. Hospitality was important in older cultures. Back then, you didn't have the luxury of checking into the Marriott or the Sheraton. Hotels at that time, if they were available, oftentimes were flea-infested or places filled with bed bugs at best, or at worst, houses of ill repute. Jews took hospitality above other cultures during biblical times. Hospitality you find rooted throughout the Old Testament. If we were to go to Genesis 18, we read about Abraham and Sarah entertaining 3 visitors. We quickly learn that these 3 visitors are actually the Lord and 2 angels. If you go down to verse 3, he said, "If I have found favor in your eyes, my Lord, do not pass your servant by. Let a little water be brought, and then you may all wash your feet and rest under this tree. Let me get you something to eat, so you can be refreshed, and then go on your way." Now, the idea of getting a meal together at that time was not an easy thing. You'd have to go out and slaughter the lamb, get the fire cooking. It was not an easy thing. But Abraham thought it was critical to do this. John MacArthur describes it this way: when Abraham and Sarah put on a nice dinner from some people that turned out to be God and 2 angels. So John MacArthur says, be careful about your hospitality. You never know who you're entertaining. This is in sharp contrast to what we see just 1 chapter later in Genesis, when these 2 angels arrive in Sodom and Gomorrah to visit Lot and to warn Lot. Instead, the reception they receive from the men of Sodom is anything but hospitable. Going further on in the Old Testament, we come to Job. Job is now arguing on how he's been an upright person. And one of the things that he brings out to go and say, I'm an upright person, I'm an upright Jew, I'm right with God, is that he says, "For my door was always open to the traveler. I was always showing hospitality to those around me. I didn't turn people away. I made sure my door was open, that I was available to them in time of need." There's a God-centered motivation for hospitality throughout. In Leviticus 19, we go and read, "The foreigner residing among you must be treated as your native born. Love them as yourself, for you were foreigners in Egypt." This world is not our own. This is not where we belong. We're foreigners. We need to remember that when we're dealing with those around us, whether we say these are people from the Far East, from China, people from the Middle East, from Egypt, or people from New York. Maybe not the New Yorkers, but anyway. What is the motivation for hospitality? We need to remember that just like the Jews were foreigners in Egypt, we're foreigners, and reach out to those around us. Going to Deuteronomy, "And you are to love those who are foreigners, for you yourselves were foreigners in Egypt." Again, this land is not our home. John Piper states, "For the people of God in the Old Testament, the duty of hospitality came right from the center of who God was." If we go on to the New Testament, we find hospitality specifically mentioned a number of times. In the NIV, we see it mentioned 7 times. Most of these times are related to hospitality towards foreigners. Occasionally it's mentioned about hospitality towards Christians and the importance for Christians to go and be reaching out to others. Going to Romans 12, 9 to 23, the first part here I want to let you know, pay attention to, is it's in the context of love and the criticality of love. But going to the end, share with the Lord's people who are in need, and then practice hospitality. The first part of verse 13 is showing love towards fellow Christians. The second part is showing love towards strangers, foreigners, those that are not Christians. The practice hospitality or pursuing hospitality is a verb that implies continuous action. It's something that we need to continue on in an ongoing manner. We can't just say, I did it once, I got that crossed out, I don't have to do it ever again. Tim Keller talks about ministering to the poor, the new immigrant, those that are marginalized, people who are different, unlovely, unconnected, unwealthy. How many of you would like to minister to those that are wealthy, those that are interesting to talk to? That's not who we're always called to minister to. The homeless. Sometimes those homeless people smell. We're still called to minister to them. Some of you here are involved in jail ministry. I received a package today to go and be praying for a woman down in Florida and for the needs that she has. Some of you are involved in the jail ministry more locally. That's not always an easy area. I know when I go over to the jail, I am always thrilled when I hear that door unlock and I'm able to push it open in order to see freedom. God calls us to go into areas that we're not always thrilled to be in. Tim Keller goes on to say, to use, I like the way he said that, use my money. I think it would be real easy to use Tim Keller's money, but I think he wants us to use our money. Use our money, our things, our home, our church, to help those who need help in their battle with loneliness. Are you reaching out to those around you that are lonely, that are hurting? I had a person in the office this week that goes to a church north of here, a church that is a very biblically sound church, a church that I recommend people to go to. And she said, I've gone there for about 5 years, and people don't have me over. People do not reach out to me. I wish they would. I feel lonely. Some of you probably feel that same way here, that you wish somebody would reach out to you. Some of you have the ability to reach out. I'd like to encourage you, reach out to those around you. There's lonely people, people that are hurting. He says, go after new people. Make them feel welcome, especially those that are not wealthy, with an attitude of heart and a practice that turns strangers into guests, friends, and eventually into brothers and sisters in the Lord. It's something that when I'm talking to you, I'm thinking, I do not always do this well. 2 weeks ago, I was in Baltimore, and my daughter Kristen and I were over by Camden Yards. We were going to go for a run. So we had running clothes on, and this woman comes up to us and says, do you have any money that I can use to get the bus fare home? And I could legitimately say no, because I had running clothes on. I had not having money. But if I'd been smart about it, I probably should have said, let me run back to the hotel. I can get some money for you. I didn't. Instead, I took the easy cop out. I said, this woman probably is just out here running some kind of scam, seeing how many $100 she can get today. And so I said, legitimately, I don't have any money on me. And I went the other way. I wasn't thinking about a woman that could be in need, and how if that had been one of my children, I'd sure hope somebody would come through with some money for her. It's something that I do not always do like I should, frequently don't do as I should. And what I want to point out here is just that in Romans, again, this is encapsulated in an area where we're reaching out, showing love, and we're showing those, bless those who persecute you, do not repay anyone evil for evil. Or in the case, I was thinking ill of that woman. I should have gone and tried to bless her even if I was thinking ill. And do not become overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Going on to Ephesians. As you look at the verses on hospitality, you can see how they talk about love. Love for fellow Christians, love for others. The hospitality we are commanded to show is no different than what Christ did for us. By setting aside in his flesh the law with its commands and regulations, his purpose was to create in himself one new humanity out of the two, thus making peace, and in one body to reconcile both of them to God through the cross, by which he put to death their hostility. Christ put to death our sins. As a result, you are no longer foreigners and strangers, but fellow citizens with God's people and also members of his household. Again, the idea of reaching out to foreigners. This is going on to the importance of hospitality and how in both Timothy and Titus we see that a mark of a committed Christian, the mark of an elder, is hospitality, of reaching out to those around him. How many of you offer hospitality, but it's grumbling, kicking, and screaming? What's Scripture say? Offer hospitality to one another without grumbling. I don't know about you, but Scripture often hits me hard. Do not forget to show hospitality to strangers, for by so doing, some people have shown hospitality to angels without knowing it. John Piper talks about strategic hospitality. Strategic hospitality is hospitality that thinks strategically and asks, how can I draw the most people into a deep experience of God's hospitality by the use of my home and my church home? Who might need reinforcements just now in the battle against loneliness? Who are the people who can be brought together in my home most strategically for the sake of the kingdom? What 2 or 3 people's complementary abilities might explode in a new ministry if they had 2 hours to brainstorm over dinner in my house? Strategic hospitality is not content to just have the old clan over for dinner again and again. It strategizes how to make the hospitality of God known and felt all over the world, from the lonely church member right here to the Gola farmers in Tano, Liberia. Don't ever underestimate the power of your living room as a launching pad for new life and hope and ministry and mission. A couple of years ago, we were at a wedding up in Montrose. During the reception, we were sitting across the table from a gentleman from New York City, originally from Jamaica, who had recently become a widower. He had, I believe it was 4 children with him, or 5 children, and looked like it was going to start snowing outside. Being from New York City and from Jamaica, I didn't think he had much experience driving in snow. So we said, hey, if you need a place to stay, give us a call, come on down. We'll be glad to put you up for the night. We have the room. He said, thank you very much, took our phone number, and said, if I need help, we'll give you a call. We got home. About 10 minutes after we got home, the phone rang. It was this gentleman on the phone. He said, may we please take you up on that offer? I said, sure. Well, first I asked Susan, is it okay? And she said, sure. And then he said, by the way, my mom and sister and my brother-in-law and his wife and their children, bottom line, we ended up 19 people showing up at our house, on about 15 minutes notice. Now, the one nice thing about people showing up on 15 minutes notice is Susan didn't make me go run around the house cleaning up everything. But we had a wonderful time that night with these Christians from New York City. It was a neat opportunity to serve, to go and show hospitality to them, to help them out in their time of need. But as I was talking about this, I thought about another family that showed hospitality in a much more difficult circumstance. Hospitality in a circumstance where food was being rationed, food was scarce, where to have certain people found in your house could go and bring very sharp punishments or penalties. The person I was thinking of that showed hospitality to those around him was Corrie ten Boom and her family. I thought, would I be willing to show hospitality in that situation? Would I be willing to show hospitality when I'm putting my entire family at risk? Would I show hospitality when I'm going to have to give up food and other things in order to have these people in my house? For those of you who don't know, Corrie ten Boom and her family did end up paying the price. They were betrayed by their fellow Dutchmen, and they went to the concentration camps where her sister died, where they suffered all kinds of brutality. That's hospitality from a Christian perspective. Hospitality where you're willing to pay a price for others. I thought, would I pay that price? Tim Keller talked to his New York City congregation about things that they could do. Some of the things that he said were, in your apartment building, invite them into your space. Now, if you spend any time in a city, you know as soon as you invite people over, they're immediately going to start thinking, why are you doing this? What's going on? Are you out to take me? Are you out to try to sell me something? Many people will turn you down in a big city, but there are people that are going to say, thank you. Thank you for taking an interest in me. Thank you for being concerned about me. So whether you're in New York City or Tunkhannock or Dallas, inviting people over to your apartment or your house. He then says, invite colleagues, work, neighbor, others into your spiritual home, into your church, into your small groups. He said sometimes this spiritually reaching out can carry an emotional and be expensive. There's a price tag with it. But still, it's critical to do. Next, he says, Christians should be eating together. He says, neat things just happen when you get together with other Christians. Last, he says, host a small group in your home. He goes and he says, it doesn't have to be fancy. He says, if you do make it fancy, the person oftentimes will think that's something special, that you've gone out of the way. That's wonderful. But he says, peanut butter and jelly is just fine. The idea that you've reached out to them, that you've been interested in them, is going to say wonders, whether it's peanut butter and jelly or filet mignon. He then talks about helping out with various organizations in the church, volunteering with Christian organizations in the area. And he says, use prayer, turn to others. He says, when you're in church, when we have our time of greeting that we do here, it's not just a matter of saying hi to your friends, but of welcoming those that are new to the church. It's awfully easy for me to go up to the folks that I know well, that I want to find out how their week was. I have to remind myself to go up to those that I don't know. I'd like to encourage you to do the same thing, to do it much better than I do. If you go to John Piper, he talks about things for them to enlarge their ministry of hospitality. He talks about reaching out to international students. He talks about picking up people at airports, having students, whether they're an international student or a college student, over for a meal. College students always like meals. And then opening your house, invite some of these people in. On the handout that I had in the back, there are some things from Kathy Lee DeMoss there on things that are beneficial for why hospitality is a good thing. And then there's some things there from John Piper. But again, remember, as in Hebrews 13, by showing hospitality to strangers, some people have shown hospitality to angels without knowing it. And then in 3 John 1, show hospitality to such people so that we may work together for the truth. Ultimately, that's what we want to do, is we want to tell people about Christ, about how Christ died for us, how he showed hospitality to us to serve. He came to earth to go and pay the price for us. Tell people about the truth of Christ. Let's pray. Dear Lord, we just thank you for this opportunity. We just thank you for how you watch over us day by day, how you have shown us hospitality. Help us to show that same hospitality